Tell me right now that you truly want to leave, and I will instantly unlock this door. Standing in her pristine penthouse office, Vivienne closed in on me, her tailored white suit radiating a lethal, suffocating pressure as my back hit the hard wood of the securely locked door. A slow, devastating curve formed on her perfectly painted red lips as she casually dropped my formal resignation letter into the metal trash can right before my eyes. But if you're lying, Chloe, don't even think about walking out of here. The intoxicating scent of her expensive jasmine perfume aggressively wrapped around me, and as I locked eyes with her piercing, hypnotic blue gaze, my racing heart had nowhere left to retreat. In this high-stakes corporate game, had I completely infuriated the city's most formidable billionaire CEO, or had I just unleashed a dangerous woman who was fiercely determined to possess me entirely? Welcome to Luna's secret library. Sometimes the most unexpected turns lead us exactly where we need to be. What happens next is something I never saw coming, and I think you'll find it just as surprising. Stick around for the conclusion. It's a reminder that it's never too late for a new chapter. If you enjoy discovering these hidden gems, I'd be honored to have you follow for more. The heavy oak door closed behind me with a soft thud. I stood alone in the center of the expansive penthouse office. The afternoon sunlight poured through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows. It washed the entire room in a beautifully bright, clear light. Dust motes danced in the sunbeams crossing the expensive Persian rug. Vivienne Sterling did not bother to look up from her silver laptop. Her manicured fingers flew across the keyboard with ruthless, mechanical precision. She was the youngest, most formidable female CEO in the entire city. She was also my direct boss. And starting today, she would strictly be my former boss. I took a deep, trembling breath to steady my racing heart. My fingers tightened nervously around the crisp white envelope in my hand. I stepped forward, my heels clicking sharply against the polished hardwood floor. I placed the envelope directly in the exact center of her pristine glass desk. The rapid typing immediately stopped. Silence stretched between us, thick, heavy, and utterly suffocating. Vivienne slowly, deliberately lowered the glowing screen of her laptop. Her icy blue eyes finally locked onto mine. She didn't even glance down at the envelope resting between us. She just stared right through me. "What exactly is this, Chloe?" she asked. Her voice was incredibly smooth and dangerously calm. "It is my formal letter of resignation," I said. I forced my voice to remain steady despite the knot in my stomach. I fully expected a flash of immediate anger. I expected her to instantly dismiss me with a careless wave of her hand. I absolutely did not expect her to smile. It was a slow, devastating curve of her perfectly painted lips. She stood up from her leather chair with effortless grace. She was wearing a tailored white suit that clung perfectly to her elegant frame. She picked up the envelope by its sharp corner. She didn't even attempt to open it. Instead, she walked around the edge of her massive desk. She moved with the silent confidence of a predator closing in on its trapped prey. I instinctively took a step back in sheer panic. My heels hit the hard edge of the leather sofa directly behind me. Vivienne kept walking forward until she was standing right in my personal space. The intoxicating scent of her expensive jasmine perfume completely wrapped around me. She reached her arm right past my shoulder. I held my breath, freezing completely in place. Her hand grasped the cold brass handle of the heavy office door. She pushed it completely shut with a solid slam. Then, she deliberately turned the deadbolt lock. A sharp, echoing click rang through the bright, silent room. "Vivienne, what are you doing?" I whispered frantically. "You cannot just lock the office door during business hours." She leaned in close, completely ignoring my protest. Her warm breath ghosted tantalizingly across my right cheek. "I am the CEO of this company," she murmured. "I can do whatever I want in my own private office." She casually dropped the unopened resignation envelope into the nearby metal trash can. "Your resignation is officially denied," she whispered softly against my ear. "You are not going anywhere, ever." "I found a much better offer elsewhere," I lied desperately. My heart was pounding so violently I honestly thought she could hear the rhythm. Vivienne chuckled, a low, throaty sound that made my toes curl. "There is absolutely no better offer out there than me, Chloe." She placed her palm flat against the door, effectively trapping me between her arm and the solid wood. She was standing so incredibly close I could easily count her long dark eyelashes. Her intense gaze slowly dropped to my trembling lips. The air between us suddenly crackled with a heavy tension that had absolutely nothing to do with corporate work. "Why are you really trying to run away from me?" she asked. Her thumb gently brushed a stray curl directly behind my sensitive ear. A violent shiver raced uncontrollably down my spine. I couldn't tear my gaze away from her piercing, hypnotic eyes. "I am not running from anyone," I barely managed to say. My voice sounded terribly weak, completely lacking its usual sharp professional edge. "Liar," she breathed softly. She stepped even closer, completely closing the final inch of empty space remaining between us. I could clearly feel the intense heat radiating off her elegant body. My back was now pressed firmly against the solid oak door with nowhere left to retreat. There was literally no possible physical escape. "You have been actively avoiding my gaze for 3 entire weeks, she stated factually. "You constantly cancel our late-night private strategy meetings. You even stopped bringing me my morning coffee yourself, sending the intern instead." She tilted her head slightly, her normally cold expression softening just a fraction. "Did I somehow intimidate you, my sweet little assistant? Or did I simply finally make you realize what it is you actually want?" I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly bone dry. My mind was spinning rapidly, completely short-circuiting under her intense, unwavering focus. This was definitely not the cold, ruthless billionaire the business media always wrote about. This was a dangerous woman who knew exactly what she desired. And right now, she was looking at me like I was the only important thing left on her daily agenda. "This situation is highly inappropriate for the workplace," I whispered, trying one last pathetic defense. Vivienne's soft lips brushed deliberately against the delicate shell of my ear. I gasped quietly, unable to control my immediate physical reaction. "We are currently standing behind a securely locked door, Chloe. The concept of appropriate left this building at least 10 minutes ago." Her hand slowly slid down my side to rest gently but firmly on my waist. The casual touch sent a massive electric shock straight down to my core. "Tell me right now that you truly want to leave, and I will instantly unlock this door," she challenged softly. She pulled back just enough to look deeply into my wide, panicked eyes. Her gaze was fiercely intense, violently stripping away all my carefully constructed professional walls. My mouth opened slightly, but absolutely no words managed to come out. I desperately wanted to say yes and walk away. I deeply needed to say yes just to save my fragile sanity. But my treacherous body completely betrayed my logical mind. I unconsciously leaned forward directly into her warm, grounding touch instead. Vivienne smiled broadly, a look of absolute, undeniable triumph crossing her incredibly beautiful features. "That is exactly what I thought you would do," she murmured. She slowly unbuttoned the top button of her pristine white suit jacket. "Now, let us sit down and properly discuss your newly revised contract terms." Vivienne gently but firmly grasped my left wrist. Her long fingers were surprisingly warm against my cold, trembling skin. She smoothly guided me away from the securely locked oak door. The bright, clear clear sunlight from the floor-to-ceiling windows illuminated her face. Every single detail of her flawless features was perfectly visible in the bright light. She gently pushed my shoulders until I fell backwards onto the soft leather sofa. I sank deep into the expensive cushions, feeling completely cornered and exposed. She did not walk over to take the armchair sitting across from me. Instead, she sat down directly beside me on the narrow sofa. Her tailored thigh pressed deliberately and heavily against my own. The intense heat of her body easily bled through the thin fabric of my skirt. I immediately tried to shift away to maintain some semblance of professional distance. Her hand shot out instantly and gripped my knee with undeniable authority. "Do not move away from me," she commanded softly. Her icy blue eyes completely locked onto mine, freezing me in place. "We are having a serious professional negotiation right now." I let out a shaky, breathless laugh that sounded entirely pathetic. "There is absolutely nothing professional about locking me inside your office." Vivienne simply smiled, a highly dangerous curve of her perfect red lips. She elegantly crossed her long legs, maintaining the burning contact between us. "As I recall, your current employment contract expires at the end of this month. That is precisely why I brought my resignation letter today," I countered bravely. "I am not renewing my contract under any circumstances." She completely ignored my defiant statement as if I hadn't spoken at all. "Your new contract comes with a massive 200% salary increase." My jaw almost dropped in sheer shock at the astronomical number. "That is a completely ridiculous amount of money for an executive assistant." "You will no longer be just an executive assistant," she stated calmly. "You will be officially promoted to my personal liaison and private manager." I frowned, suddenly highly suspicious of her incredibly smooth words. "What exactly does that made-up title even mean, Vivienne?" Vivienne leaned closer, her expensive jasmine perfume aggressively invading my senses. "It means your daily duties will significantly expand past these office walls. You will manage all of my evening schedules and private appointments. You will personally accompany me to all private dinners and weekend galas. You will practically live your entire life by my side." My heart pounded a frantic, terrifying rhythm against my tight ribcage. This was definitely not a standard corporate job description. This sounded exactly like a romantic relationship built entirely on a payroll. "I cannot possibly accept those outrageous terms," I whispered hoarsely. "My own personal life would completely cease to exist." Vivienne reached up and gently tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear. Her soft fingertips lingered deliberately against the sensitive skin of my neck. "I am offering you a completely new life, Chloe. A life entirely consumed by me. You cannot legally force me to sign any contract," I argued weakly. My voice severely lacked any real conviction or actual anger. "I never force anyone to do anything," she murmured smoothly. "But I am incredibly good at the art of persuasion." She slowly traced the sharp line of my jaw with her soft thumb. I shivered violently under her electric, intoxicating touch. The bright, clear light of the office felt like a spotlight on my rapidly crumbling defenses. "What if I just say no?" I asked softly, barely breathing. "I will simply reject your resignation letter again," she replied without hesitation. "I will make absolutely sure every other company in this city rejects your applications." "You are being completely unreasonable and tyrannical," I gasped out. "I am simply protecting what is already rightfully mine," she stated fiercely. Her incredibly intense gaze slowly dropped down to my trembling lips. "And you have been mine since the very first day you walked into this building." The absolute possessive authority in her tone made my breath hitch violently. I desperately wanted to push her away and run straight out the door. Instead, I found my eyes uncontrollably tracing the shape of her mouth. "You are absolutely terrified of how much you actually want this," she whispered. She was entirely, devastatingly correct. I was terrified of the overwhelming power she effortlessly held over my foolish heart. Just agree to read the new contract, she urged softly, her lips hovering near mine. I will have the legal department draft it up by this evening. Until then, you will sit right here and keep me company. I still have a massive stack of quarterly reports to review at my desk, I protested half-heartedly. Vivienne abruptly leaned forward and gently bit down on my lower lip. It was a brief, shocking nip that sent pure liquid fire directly through my veins. I let out a soft, embarrassing whimper of genuine surprise. The reports can wait until tomorrow, she murmured darkly against my mouth. Right now, your only job is me. She pulled back slightly, her beautiful eyes dark with completely unchecked desire. The bright, clear daylight perfectly highlighted the slight, rare flush on her usually pale cheeks. I realized, with a sudden, massive jolt of clarity, that she was just as deeply affected as I was. This incredibly powerful billionaire was genuinely desperate for me to stay with her. My trembling hands slowly, hesitantly moved to rest flat against her tailored white lapels. I could actually feel the rapid, heavy beating of her heart beneath the fine silk fabric. You are completely insane, I breathed out, my thumbs gently brushing her collar. Only when it comes to you, she admitted freely and without a trace of shame. Her raw honesty completely shattered my final remaining professional boundaries. Fine, I whispered, finally surrendering to the inevitable pull of her dark gravity. I will read your ridiculous, demanding new contract. Vivienne's smile was absolutely radiant, completely transforming her usual cold demeanor. Good girl, she purred, her voice a low vibration that shook my very core. Now, how about we sit here and properly negotiate your new signing bonus? The sleek black town car glided smoothly through the bustling evening traffic of the metropolis. I sat rigidly in the plush leather backseat right next to my newly defined employer. The ink on my drastically revised employment contract was probably not even dry yet. Vivienne was casually scrolling through her phone with an air of absolute relaxed triumph. The glowing screen illuminated her sharp jawline in the otherwise dim interior of the vehicle. We are skipping the scheduled charity gala tonight, she announced without looking up. I turned my head sharply to stare at her perfect, composed side profile. My new schedule clearly indicated we had a mandatory appearance at the museum, I reminded her. As my private manager, your first lesson is learning that my schedule is entirely subject to my whims. The car pulled smoothly into the highly secured underground garage of a luxury residential skyscraper. This was absolutely not the art museum located in the busy cultural district. This was the exclusive building where Vivienne Sterling kept her private penthouse apartment. My heart immediately kicked into a frantic, nervous rhythm against my ribs. Why exactly are we at your private residence? I asked, my voice betraying my sudden anxiety. Vivienne finally put her phone away and turned her full, devastating attention toward me. You are officially managing my evening routine now, Chloe. And my evening routine tonight requires absolute privacy and a very good bottle of wine. The private elevator shot upward at a dizzying, ear-popping speed toward the very top floor. We stood shoulder to shoulder in the confined, mirrored space of the elevator cab. I could see our dual reflections endlessly repeating in the polished glass walls. I looked entirely out of my depth, clutching my designer briefcase like a pathetic shield. Vivienne looked like a conquering queen bringing her chosen prize back to her impenetrable fortress. The elevator doors parted silently to reveal a massive, breathtaking living space. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a completely unobstructed, panoramic view of the glittering city skyline. The apartment was decorated in sleek shades of charcoal, silver, and deep midnight blue. It was impeccably clean, fiercely elegant, and completely devoid of any distracting warmth. It was a perfect architectural representation of the powerful woman standing right beside me. "Put your bag down on the console," Vivienne instructed softly, stepping out of her expensive heels. I numbly obeyed, my hands trembling slightly as I placed the leather bag on the marble table. The heavy silence of the massive penthouse pressed down on me from all sides. There were no ringing phones, no frantic interns, and absolutely no professional buffers left between us. Vivienne walked slowly toward the center of the dark, luxurious living room. She unbuttoned her crisp white suit jacket and carelessly tossed it onto a nearby velvet armchair. "Come here," she commanded, her voice dropping an entire octave. My sensible shoes felt like they were permanently glued to the polished hardwood floor. Every single instinct I possessed screamed at me to maintain a safe physical distance. But the heavy, invisible leash of my newly signed contract pulled me forward anyway. I crossed the vast room until I was standing just inches behind her elegant back. "Unzip my dress," she murmured, slightly turning her head to look at me over her shoulder. I choked on a sudden, sharp intake of air at the incredibly intimate request. "I am supposed to be your manager, not your personal maid," I managed to whisper out. Vivienne let out a soft, dark chuckle that vibrated right through the quiet room. "You agreed to handle all of my highly personal needs after normal office hours. This particular need is currently at the very top of my immediate priority list." I swallowed heavily, my throat tight with a dangerous mixture of panic and undeniable anticipation. My shaking fingers slowly reached out to grasp the small, cold metal zipper at the nape of her neck. The moment my skin accidentally brushed against her bare neck, she let out a quiet sigh. I slowly pulled the zipper down, centimeter by agonizingly slow centimeter. The delicate silk fabric parted, revealing the smooth, flawless expanse of her pale spine. I was standing so close I could actually see the subtle rise and fall of her back as she breathed. The intoxicating scent of jasmine and warm skin completely overwhelmed my rational thoughts. "You are incredibly tense tonight, Chloe," she noted softly, feeling my hands tremble against her dress. "I am currently undressing my billionaire boss in her private penthouse," I pointed out breathlessly. "I believe a certain level of tension is perfectly justified given the present circumstances." The zipper finally reached the lowest point at the very curve of her lower back. I quickly pulled my hands away as if the expensive silk fabric had physically burned my fingers. Vivienne turned around to face me, holding the loosened bodice of the dress against her chest. The low, ambient lighting of the apartment cast highly alluring shadows across her beautiful face. "You need to stop thinking of me merely as your strict corporate boss," she instructed, stepping closer. She reached out and gently rested both of her hands squarely on my rigid shoulders. "The entire dynamic between us fundamentally shifted the second you signed that paper. You did not just agree to manage my complex daily calendar. You effectively surrendered your evenings to me in exchange for keeping your place by my side." Her thumbs began to slowly, rhythmically massage the tight knots forming at the base of my neck. The unexpected, tender gesture sent a wave of dangerous lethargy straight through my tired muscles. I let my eyes flutter shut for just a fraction of a second, helplessly leaning into her touch. "I only stayed because you threatened to destroy my future career," I lied softly into the quiet room. Vivienne leaned in, pressing her soft forehead gently against mine in the gathering darkness. "We both know you are far too smart to actually believe that ridiculous, shallow excuse. You stayed because you are just as deeply addicted to this dangerous game as I am." Vivienne slowly stepped away from my trembling hands. The sudden loss of her overwhelming physical presence left me incredibly cold. She let the expensive silk bodice of her dress slip slightly further down her shoulders. She did not bother to pull the delicate metal zipper back up. Instead, she walked gracefully across the vast living room toward the sleek marble bar. The soft, ambient lighting cast long, beautiful shadows across her bare upper back. I stood completely frozen in the center of the room, still trapped in her invisible gravity. My fingertips literally tingled from the brief, electric contact with her warm skin. She picked up a heavy crystal decanter filled with dark, rich red wine. She expertly poured the deep crimson liquid into 2 large, elegant glasses. I watched the smooth, practiced movement of her hands in total silence. Those were the exact same hands that ruthlessly destroyed rival companies on a daily basis. Now, they simply looked incredibly delicate against the fragile crystal stems. She turned back around and silently offered one of the glasses out to me. I forced my heavy legs to move forward across the plush Persian rug. I reached out and carefully took the offered glass from her elegant fingers. Our knuckles brushed together, sending another violent spark of electricity straight up my arm. Vivienne did not immediately pull her hand away from mine. She looked down at her own glass and let out a long, deeply exhausted sigh. It was a sound I had never once heard in the pristine corporate office. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated weariness. She brought the crystal rim to her lips and took a long, slow sip. The dark wine stained her perfect lips a mesmerizing shade of deep crimson. People always assume that having absolute power makes you completely invincible, she whispered into the quiet room. She did not look at me, her gaze fixed somewhere on the glittering city skyline outside the massive windows. They think the money and the status create an impenetrable armor around you. She let out a dry, humorless laugh that honestly broke my heart just a fraction. But the truth is, the higher you climb, the colder the air around you becomes. You eventually reach a point where you literally cannot trust a single person in your entire life. I stared at her, utterly captivated by this sudden, raw display of deep vulnerability. This was not the terrifying billionaire CEO who commanded intense fear and respect from everyone. This was just Vivienne, a deeply lonely woman hiding behind a flawless, ironclad facade. Is that why you forced me to sign that ridiculous private manager contract? I asked softly. I took a small, hesitant sip of the rich, heavy wine to wet my terribly dry throat. Because you simply wanted someone you could finally trust. Vivienne slowly turned her head, her icy blue eyes now completely soft and totally unguarded. The dim lighting caught a faint, shocking glimmer of unshed emotion pooling in her beautiful eyes. I forced you to stay because you are the only completely real thing in my entire world, Chloe. Her voice was barely above a fragile whisper, completely devoid of its usual commanding authority. You never once looked at me like I was just a giant, walking dollar sign. You looked at me like I was an actual human being. She took another slow step toward me, quickly closing the small physical distance we had briefly regained. And when you handed me that resignation letter today, I genuinely felt my entire chest cave in. I literally could not breathe at the absolute thought of you walking out of my life forever. My heart ached with a sudden, overwhelming wave of fierce, protective warmth. The strict professional boundaries I had desperately tried to maintain suddenly felt entirely pointless. I carefully reached out and set my half-full wine glass down on the cold marble counter. I did not think about the legal contract, the strict company rules, or the inherent danger of this situation. I simply reacted to the profound, quiet sadness radiating from the woman standing right in front of me. I gently reached up and cupped her right cheek with my bare hand. Vivienne gasped softly, her long dark eyelashes fluttering shut at my totally unexpected, voluntary touch. She immediately leaned her face deeply into my warm palm, practically chasing the comforting contact. She looked incredibly fragile in that exact moment, like a beautiful porcelain doll on the absolute edge of shattering. You do not ever have to use a legally binding contract to keep me here, Vivienne, I confessed softly. The absolute truth of those highly dangerous words terrified me, but I could not take them back now. I have been completely mesmerized by you since the very first interview we ever had. Vivienne opened her eyes slowly, the deep vulnerability instantly mixing with a burning, intense heat. She reached up and covered my hand with her own, lacing our fingers securely together against her face. "Then why did you try to run away from me today?" she asked, her voice trembling just the slightest bit. "Because falling in love with your incredibly powerful boss is absolute professional suicide," I admitted with a breathless, shaky laugh. "It is incredibly terrifying, and it has absolutely no logical guarantee of a happy ending." Vivienne gently turned her head and pressed a soft, lingering kiss directly into the center of my palm. The intimate, incredibly tender gesture sent a massive shockwave of pure desire straight through my entire body. "I am the CEO of our entire universe, Chloe," she murmured against my sensitive skin, her voice dropping to a dark, seductive purr. "I will personally rewrite every single rule in this entire city to ensure our happy ending." She reached out with her free hand and gently wrapped it around my waist. She smoothly pulled my body flush against hers, completely erasing any remaining physical space between us. I dropped my hands down to rest flat against her bare, warm shoulders. The soft silk of her loosened evening dress bunched up underneath my trembling fingertips. We were standing completely alone in the silent, luxurious penthouse, miles above the rest of the dark world. There were absolutely no corporate secrets, no demanding board members, and absolutely no hiding left to do. There was only the overwhelming, undeniable pull of the intense gravity holding us completely together. "Show me that you truly mean it, Chloe," she challenged softly, her lips hovering mere millimeters from mine. "Show me that you are finally ready to stop running away from what rightfully belongs to me." The silence in the penthouse suddenly felt incredibly loud and intensely heavy. Vivienne's direct challenge hung dangerously in the narrow space between us. Her icy blue eyes were completely dark with intense, totally unspoken desire. I did not waste another single second doubting my own highly irrational choices. I leaned forward and pressed my trembling lips directly against her own. The initial contact was incredibly tentative and heartbreakingly gentle. I honestly expected the ruthless billionaire to completely take over the moment immediately. Instead, Vivienne simply stood entirely still under my cautious, hesitant touch. She let out a soft, shattered sigh that tasted exactly like expensive red wine. Her unexpected physical surrender gave me a sudden, massive surge of unprecedented courage. I slid my hands up her bare arms to firmly cup her beautiful, flawless face. I tilted her head slightly and deepened the kiss with a newfound desperate hunger. That was the exact, fatal moment the powerful CEO finally snapped completely. Vivienne let out a low, dangerous growl deep in the back of her throat. Her strong arms wrapped securely around my waist like an unbreakable steel vice. She effortlessly lifted me completely off the polished hardwood floor in one smooth motion. I gasped directly into her mouth as she backed me up against the cool marble counter. My sensible work heels dangled uselessly several inches above the ground. Her lips moved against mine with a frantic, completely undeniable, and absolute urgency. It was a punishing, deeply bruising kiss that demanded absolute, total submission. And I gladly surrendered every single hidden part of myself to her overwhelming gravity. Our tongues tangled together in a desperate, deeply intoxicating, and chaotic rhythm. The sharp taste of the crimson wine mixed perfectly with her natural sweetness. My fingers dug helplessly into the soft silk fabric of her half-unzipped evening gown. I could actually feel the rapid, frantic pounding of her heart against my own chest. It completely mirrored the terrifying, wild rhythm of my own racing pulse. She finally pulled back just a fraction of an inch to take a jagged, much-needed breath. Both of our chests heaved violently in the suddenly stifling air of the massive room. Her forehead rested heavily against mine, her eyes burning with an intense, proprietary fire. "You are absolutely completely mine now, Chloe," she whispered darkly against my swollen lips. There is absolutely no going back to the boring way things were yesterday morning. I literally do not ever want to go back, I confessed breathlessly into the narrow space between us. Vivienne smiled, a devastatingly triumphant curve of her kiss-swollen mouth. She gently set me back down onto my feet but firmly refused to loosen her tight grip. Good, she murmured, gently kissing the rapid pulse point at the base of my throat. Because your new contract explicitly states you belong to me 24 hours a day. I let out a soft, highly embarrassed whimper at the undeniable truth of her arrogant statement. She slowly began to trail soft, open-mouthed kisses along my highly sensitive jawline. Every single place her lips touched immediately ignited with pure, dangerous liquid fire. I am going to completely ruin you for any other person on this entire planet, she promised softly. She smoothly picked me up again, this time entirely cradling me securely in her strong arms. I instinctively wrapped my legs tightly around her narrow waist to hold on. She carried me effortlessly away from the marble bar and toward the dark hallway. The heavy silence of the expensive penthouse was now completely filled with the sound of our ragged breathing. I buried my flushed face completely into the crook of her incredibly warm, fragrant neck. I had absolutely no idea where she was actually taking me within the massive apartment. And the most terrifying part was that I truly did not care about the destination at all anymore. I completely trusted the ruthless corporate CEO with every single fragile piece of my heart. She carried me into a massive, elegantly decorated and extremely modern master bedroom. The moonlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a gigantic king-sized bed. She gently laid me down perfectly in the center of the dark, expensive silk sheets. The smooth fabric was incredibly cool against my thoroughly overheated, sensitive skin. Vivienne immediately followed me down, pinning my hands gently but firmly above my head. She looked down at me like I was the most valuable corporate acquisition of her entire life. Tell me exactly what you want right now, my sweet assistant, she commanded in a low, husky whisper. I want you to stop talking and just kiss me again, I demanded with surprising, bold authority. Vivienne let out a soft, incredibly delighted laugh that echoed loudly in the quiet bedroom. Your wish is my absolute command, manager, she purred, crashing her lips down onto mine once more. The physical connection between us was completely electric and profoundly intoxicating. She effortlessly mapped every single inch of my mouth with an undeniable, fierce hunger. I completely forgot about the massive stack of unfinished paperwork sitting on my office desk. I forgot about the strict company policies explicitly forbidding romantic relationships between colleagues. The only thing that actually mattered was the intense, burning heat of her body pressed firmly against mine. Her long fingers slowly tangled themselves deep into my messy, totally unstyled hair. A gentle, incredibly possessive tug completely exposed the long, sensitive column of my neck. She instantly abandoned my lips to press a hot, lingering kiss directly against my racing pulse. I arched my back slightly, helplessly chasing the overwhelming, intense friction of her touch. You are so incredibly beautiful, she murmured softly against my burning, flushed skin. I had never once heard the famously terrifying Vivienne Sterling sound this deeply, profoundly reverent. Her incredibly sweet words completely shattered the final, lingering remnants of my professional hesitation. I managed to easily free one of my wrists from her surprisingly gentle, totally secure hold. I reached down and firmly grasped the expensive lapels of her loosened white evening gown. With a sudden, bold surge of total confidence, I completely flipped our physical positions on the massive bed. Vivienne let out a sharp, genuinely surprised gasp as her bare back hit the cool silk sheets. I confidently straddled her narrow waist, looking down at her perfectly flushed, unbelievably gorgeous face. Her icy blue eyes widened considerably, completely shocked by my sudden, aggressive dominance. You are not the only one who likes to be entirely in control, boss, I whispered fiercely. A slow, completely wicked smile spread across Vivienne's beautiful, kiss-swollen lips. Then show me exactly what you can do, Chloe, she challenged, clearly highly amused and deeply aroused. I leaned down and fiercely captured her lips, entirely ready to prove my absolute, undeniable dedication. The long, deeply complicated night of renegotiating our highly personal boundaries had only just begun. Morning sunlight pierced the heavy floor-to-ceiling glass windows. I blinked my heavy eyes against the sudden, blinding glare. Expensive silk sheets tangled tightly around my bare legs. I was lying in the exact center of Vivienne Sterling's massive bed. The undeniable weight of last night crashed heavily down on my waking mind. I carefully turned my head to the side to look at her. Vivienne was sleeping soundly just inches away from my face. Her dark hair was a wild, beautiful mess across the white pillow. Her usually sharp, intimidating features were completely relaxed. She looked breathtakingly soft in the quiet morning light. My heart gave a massive, painful thud against my ribs. The stark reality of my complicated situation washed over me. I was still officially her executive assistant on the corporate payroll. I slowly, agonizingly tried to slide out from under the heavy duvet. I needed to find my wrinkled work clothes scattered on the floor. I needed to order her coffee and pretend my world had not shifted. Before my feet could touch the cold hardwood, a strong arm clamped around my waist. Vivienne did not even open her eyes as she pulled me forcefully back. Where exactly do you think you are going? She mumbled into the pillows. Her morning voice was incredibly deep and dangerously raspy. I need to prepare your daily schedule, I whispered nervously. I am trying very hard to be your highly efficient assistant. Vivienne let out a soft, highly amused groan and buried her face in my neck. The highly efficient assistant died a beautiful death last night, she murmured. Her warm breath sent an immediate, violent shiver straight down my spine. You are my private manager now, and your only priority is staying here. She threw her bare leg over mine, effectively pinning me to the mattress. There was absolutely no room for professional distance in this bed. We have a major board meeting in 2 hours, I reminded her strictly. The board members can easily wait for us, she stated with absolute finality. She finally opened her icy blue eyes to look at me. She stared with a fierce, unapologetic possessive clarity. You never need to run away from me in the daylight, Chloe. I meant every single word I said to you in the dark. I completely melted into her warm, grounding embrace. All my lingering professional panic evaporated in an instant. The ride to the corporate headquarters an hour later was equally surreal. The sleek black town car navigated the busy morning traffic in total silence. The soundproof privacy partition separating us from the driver was firmly raised. Vivienne sat beside me, impeccably dressed and radiating terrifying authority. However, her right hand was completely intertwined with my left hand. She kept our joined hands resting casually on her tailored black thigh. Her thumb continuously stroked the sensitive skin of my knuckles. The rhythmic motion was a constant reminder of her absolute claim over me. I stared blindly out the tinted window, my face burning hotly. I was terrified that someone would notice the drastic change between us. I was even more terrified of how perfectly right it felt to hold her hand. You are overthinking everything again, Vivienne noted quietly. I am just trying to mentally prepare myself for the workplace, I defended weakly. She squeezed my hand firmly, demanding my absolute full attention. The workplace belongs to me, and so do you, she stated matter-of-factly. 2 hours later, the atmosphere in the executive boardroom was completely terrifying. The temperature in the massive room felt like it had dropped below freezing. Vivienne sat at the very head of the long mahogany table. Her icy glare was fixed deadly upon the director of marketing. She exuded pure, unadulterated intimidation from every single pore. "This quarterly projection is a complete insult to my intelligence," she stated coldly. The older man physically flinched under her ruthless scrutiny. "I do not pay you a seven-figure salary to deliver mediocre garbage." The entire room of highly paid executives sat in absolute, terrified silence. I stood quietly in the far corner, clutching my digital tablet. I tried my hardest to remain entirely invisible against the wall. It was deeply jarring to see her act so viciously after our tender morning. Vivienne slammed the glossy report down onto the table with a sharp crack. "Redo the entire campaign by tomorrow morning, or pack up your desk entirely." She abruptly turned her heavy leather chair away from the trembling executive. Her icy blue eyes swept across the large room and locked directly onto mine. The absolute transformation in her demeanor was incredibly shocking to witness. The harsh, furious lines of her beautiful face instantly smoothed out completely. The terrifying coldness in her gaze vanished entirely in less than a second. It was rapidly replaced by a warm, undeniable, and deep fondness. "Chloe, my throat is slightly dry from all this shouting," she said softly. Her voice had instantly dropped back to that gentle, velvet tone. Every single head in the boardroom snapped around to stare at me. Vivienne Sterling never spoke to anyone with that level of gentle consideration. I swallowed hard under the sudden, intense scrutiny of the entire board. "I will have a fresh glass of water brought in immediately," I replied professionally. "Actually, I would prefer that special herbal tea you made for me," she requested. She leaned back gracefully, completely ignoring the stunned executives around her. "The one with the honey," she added, offering me a tiny, incredibly private smile. It was a blatant, highly public display of absolute, unashamed favoritism. She was deliberately drawing an unmistakable line between me and the rest of the world. "Right away," I whispered, practically fleeing the heavy tension of the room. As the heavy glass doors closed behind me, my heart pounded a frantic rhythm. I finally realized exactly what it meant to be the sole weakness of a billionaire. She would happily burn the entire world down just to keep me warm. News travels incredibly fast in a highly competitive corporate skyscraper. By the time the afternoon lunch hour arrived, the entire building was actively buzzing with vicious, undeniable whispers. I could practically feel the heavy, judgmental stares burning directly into my back every single time I walked down the long hallway. The once respectful and polite nods from the junior staff members were completely replaced by secretive, highly knowing smirks. They had all clearly seen the notoriously ruthless Ice Queen openly favor her seemingly humble assistant during a major meeting. It was the absolute perfect, highly explosive recipe for a massive, career-ending corporate scandal. I desperately tried to hide my rapidly growing anxiety behind a massive stack of thick financial folders. I silently retreated to the quiet, completely empty employee lounge on the 42nd floor to simply catch my ragged breath. I just desperately needed 5 minutes of absolute silence away from Vivienne's overwhelming, fiercely protective gravity. I poured myself a simple glass of cold water with hands that visibly shook under the harsh fluorescent lights. The heavy frosted glass door suddenly swung open with a violent, incredibly startling crash. Marcus, the recently humiliated and clearly furious director of marketing, stepped aggressively into the quiet room. His normally handsome face was completely twisted into a deeply ugly, highly vindictive sneer. He deliberately pushed the door shut and locked it behind him, perfectly mirroring Vivienne's exact, terrifying action from yesterday afternoon. But this particular locked door did not make my racing heart flutter with secret, forbidden anticipation. It only filled my churning stomach with a freezing cold, completely terrifying sense of pure dread. Well, if it isn't the mighty CEO's brand new favorite little pet, Marcus spat bitterly into the silence. I immediately clutched the heavy financial folders tightly to my chest like a completely useless, pathetic paper shield. This is a designated employee break room, Marcus, I stated clearly, trying incredibly hard to keep my voice perfectly steady. I highly suggest you unlock that door right now before I instantly call the building security team. He laughed loudly, a harsh, incredibly grating sound that echoed terrifyingly off the sterile white walls. You honestly think the security team is going to save your pathetic little career when the executive board finds out about this? He took a highly threatening, completely aggressive step toward me, deeply invading my safe personal space. Everyone in this entire building knows exactly how you miraculously earned that ridiculous promotion to private manager overnight. You shamelessly slept your way right into the luxury penthouse, didn't you, you pathetic little gold digger? My entire body physically trembled with a sudden, highly violent mixture of deep shame and furious, blinding anger. My professional and private relationship with Vivienne is absolutely none of your damn business, I fired back hotly. It instantly becomes my personal business when that crazy bitch threatens my 7-figure job because she is too distracted by her new toy, he snarled viciously. I am going directly to the executive board of directors this very afternoon to report this massive conflict of interest. I am going to completely expose this disgusting, highly unethical abuse of corporate power to the financial press. They will legally force her to resign in total disgrace, and you will be completely blacklisted from every single company in this entire state. My breath caught painfully in my tight, completely constricted throat at the sheer magnitude of his vicious threat. He was directly attacking the one highly successful thing Vivienne had spent her entire difficult life building from scratch. I could easily walk away and find a new job, but I absolutely could not let him destroy her hard-earned, magnificent empire. You will not say a single, pathetic word to the executive board, a terrifyingly calm, deeply familiar voice suddenly announced from behind him. Marcus literally jumped backward in sheer terror, his arrogant face immediately draining of all visible color. The heavy glass door had been quietly unlocked from the outside with a master executive keycard. Vivienne Sterling stood perfectly framed in the open doorway like a beautiful, highly lethal, and completely unstoppable weapon. She was no longer wearing the soft, incredibly fond expression I had seen in the morning boardroom. She radiated pure, unadulterated, and utterly terrifying corporate fury from every single inch of her elegant frame. She slowly stepped into the small lounge, the sharp, rhythmic click of her designer heels sounding exactly like an impending death knell. She did not even bother to cast a single glance at the trembling, sweating director of marketing. Her icy blue eyes locked instantly onto my pale, highly frightened face with a laser-like, intense focus. She effortlessly crossed the small room and firmly placed herself directly between my trembling body and Marcus. It was an undeniably primitive, fiercely protective, and completely territorial stance that fully shielded my entire existence. Did he actually try to physically hurt you? She asked me softly, her gentle tone completely ignoring the other man's panic. No, I am completely fine, I whispered honestly, instantly grounded and fully anchored by her overwhelming, powerful presence. Vivienne gently reached out her hand and softly tucked a stray, messy lock of hair perfectly behind my right ear. Then, she finally turned her head slowly to look at the totally defeated, absolutely terrified executive. You have exactly 5 short minutes to clear out your desk and leave my building forever before I have you physically thrown out, she stated with absolute, freezing coldness. You cannot legally fire me without full board approval and a thorough HR investigation. Marcus shouted desperately, his voice cracking loudly with sheer panic. I actually personally own 51% of this entire holding company, Marcus, she reminded him with a deadly, completely unbothered calm. I absolutely am the board of directors, and my word is the only law that truly matters here. And I will personally ensure you never find employment in this entire industry again for the rest of your miserable life. Marcus practically scrambled violently over his own expensive shoes as he desperately fled the small room in absolute terror. The heavy door swung completely shut once again, leaving us entirely alone in the sudden, heavy, ringing silence. My weak legs finally gave out completely, but Vivienne immediately caught my waist securely before I could fall to the floor. Her incredibly strong arms wrapped tightly around my trembling shoulders, pulling me completely flush against her warm chest. I am so incredibly sorry, I completely broke down, fully burying my flushed face deep into her expensive white suit jacket. He is going to maliciously tell everyone the truth, and it will completely ruin your absolutely spotless professional reputation. Vivienne let out a soft, highly dismissive, and completely arrogant breath that gently ruffled my messy hair. I honestly do not care at all what a bunch of pathetic, highly jealous men think about my personal life, Chloe. She gently tilted my chin up with her soft fingers, practically forcing me to meet her incredibly intense, entirely unwavering gaze. I absolutely did not build this massive, multi-billion-dollar empire just to let it dictate how I live my actual existence. I built it specifically so that no one on this entire planet could ever tell me what I cannot possess. She leaned down quickly and pressed a deep, aggressively possessive, and completely bruising kiss directly onto my parted lips. It was a devastating kiss that completely tasted like absolute, unchecked power and total, undeniable victory. And I absolutely must possess you entirely, she murmured darkly against my swollen, trembling mouth. If the rest of the world actually has a problem with us, I will simply buy the entire world and legally fire them all. The private helicopter landed smoothly on the secluded coastal estate. The deafening roar of the massive engine finally died down to a gentle hum. I stepped out onto the pristine green lawn with visibly trembling legs. The salty ocean breeze immediately tangled through my messy hair. Vivienne took my hand firmly and guided me away from the landing pad. We walked toward a stunning modern glass mansion overlooking the crashing waves. This was not the cold, sterile penthouse located in the busy city center. This place felt entirely different, radiating an unexpected and quiet warmth. I bought this hidden property exactly 3 years ago, she said softly. Her voice easily broke the peaceful silence of the breathtaking coastline. That was right around the same time I hired a brilliant new assistant. I stopped walking and turned to look at her in genuine surprise. Are you telling me you bought a cliffside mansion because of me? Vivienne smiled, a rare expression that finally reached her icy blue eyes. I needed a secure place where I could eventually hide you from the rest of the world. Her profound honesty was no longer terrifying, but deeply moving. We stepped through the massive sliding glass doors into the spacious living area. The entire house was decorated in warm, inviting shades of amber and cream. There were no corporate files, no digital screens, and no ticking clocks. She gently slipped the heavy suit jacket off my tired shoulders. Her touch was remarkably tender, a stark contrast to her earlier ruthless fury. You were extraordinarily brave today, Chloe, she whispered, her lips brushing my temple. I was genuinely terrified, I admitted, leaning back into her solid embrace. But I was far more terrified of losing you than losing my corporate career. Vivienne wrapped her arms securely around my waist, resting her chin on my shoulder. We stood together in silence, watching the golden sunset paint the ocean waves. I have spent my entire life building an impenetrable fortress, she confessed quietly. I thought absolute power was the only real way to guarantee my own safety. She slowly turned me around so we were finally standing face to face. The dying sunlight caught the stunning, raw vulnerability etched into her features. But the moment you walked into my office, my entire fortress became completely irrelevant. You effortlessly dismantled all my careful defenses without even trying. I reached up and gently traced the sharp line of her beautiful jaw. I never wanted to dismantle you, Vivienne. I only ever wanted to understand the woman hiding behind the terrifying title. She leaned down and captured my lips in a slow, devastatingly tender kiss. There was no frantic desperation or aggressive dominance in this specific touch. It was a deep, quiet promise of absolute devotion and profound trust. My hands slid up to tangle securely in her dark, wind-blown hair. She tasted like sea salt, expensive jasmine tea, and overwhelming relief. The last lingering shadows of my professional doubt vanished in the fading light. I was no longer just her executive assistant or her private manager. I was the only person she truly allowed to see her bare soul. I am never going back to that corporate office, she murmured against my mouth. I blinked in surprise, pulling back slightly to search her serious eyes. You cannot just abandon a multi-billion-dollar empire, I argued breathlessly. I already transferred the daily operations to the executive board this morning, she revealed calmly. My jaw dropped at the sheer magnitude of her shocking confession. You planned to step down before Marcus even tried to threaten us. She nodded slowly, a wicked, triumphant spark returning to her intense gaze. I told you I was rewriting all the rules to ensure our future together. Running that massive company requires my constant, undivided attention. And I have recently decided to redirect all of my attention entirely toward you. She lifted me effortlessly into her arms, carrying me toward the grand staircase. You are completely insane, I laughed softly, burying my flushed face in her neck. I am simply a very brilliant investor, she purred, taking the stairs with practiced grace. And you are the only precious future I care about securing now. We have the entire weekend completely to ourselves. There will be no phone calls, no emergency meetings, and zero interruptions. She pushed open the heavy mahogany doors of the beautiful master suite. The room was bathed in the soft, romantic glow of the rising silver moon. She laid me down gently onto the massive, plush mattress. Her gaze swept over me with a deep reverence that made my heart race wildly. I love you, Chloe, she stated simply, the words carrying the weight of a sacred vow. It was the very first time she had ever spoken those specific words out loud. Tears of pure, unadulterated joy pricked the corners of my eyes. I love you too, Vivienne, I answered, pulling her down to join me in the dark. The dangerous game of power had finally ended, leaving only us. 6 entire months had passed since we left the towering corporate skyscrapers completely behind. The warm spring breeze drifted lazily through the open glass windows of the cliffside mansion. I sat quietly at the beautiful glass desk in our bright, sunlit home office. The morning sunlight washed the entire room in an incredibly clear, golden glow. It was a perfect, peaceful mirror of that fateful afternoon in her corporate penthouse. Except there were absolutely no ringing phones, no frantic emails, and zero professional fear. I carefully folded a crisp white piece of paper and slipped it into an envelope. Footsteps padded softly against the polished hardwood floor directly behind me. Vivienne wrapped her bare arms casually around my shoulders from behind. She pressed a warm, deeply lingering kiss exactly into the sensitive curve of my neck. She was wearing my oversized grey sweater, looking breathtakingly relaxed and soft. The terrifying, icy billionaire CEO the world feared was completely gone. In her place was simply the beautiful woman I woke up next to every single morning. What exactly are you working on so early, my love? She murmured sleepily against my warm skin. I took a deep, highly theatrical breath to steady my perfectly calm heart. I picked up the crisp white envelope from the center of the pristine glass desk. I turned around slowly in my comfortable chair and held it directly out to her. This is my formal letter of resignation, I announced with a completely straight face. Vivienne's icy blue eyes widened for just a fraction of a second in pure shock. Then, a slow, incredibly wicked smile spread flawlessly across her kiss-swollen lips. She took the envelope gently by its sharp corner, exactly like she did 6 months ago. Instead of immediately throwing it into the metal trash can, she gracefully walked over to the office door. She pushed the heavy oak door completely shut with a highly familiar, solid thud. She deliberately turned the metal deadbolt lock with a sharp, echoing click. I clearly recall telling you that your resignation is permanently denied, Chloe, she whispered softly. She walked back toward my desk with the silent, undeniable confidence of a deeply contented predator. I am locking the door right now so you cannot possibly escape this new negotiation. I laughed out loud, the joyful sound ringing freely in the bright, sunny room. You might want to actually open the envelope this time around, boss. Vivienne raised an elegant dark eyebrow and smoothly tore the white paper open. She unfolded the single sheet of paper, her beautiful eyes quickly scanning my neat handwriting. I watched the profound, stunning realization completely transform her flawless features. I am officially resigning from my demanding position as your private manager, I recited softly. Because I am finally ready to accept the permanent promotion to your wife. The piece of paper slipped entirely forgotten from her suddenly trembling fingers. It fluttered gently down to the hardwood floor exactly like a falling white feather. Vivienne immediately dropped to her knees right beside my office chair. She desperately took both of my hands and pressed them fervently against her warm lips. There were actual tears of pure, unadulterated joy shining brightly in her stunning eyes. I already drew up that specific lifetime contract in my head 3 years ago, she confessed breathlessly. It comes with a strict, absolute monopoly over my entire heart, forever. I believe those are highly acceptable terms, I whispered, leaning down to meet her beautiful face. She captured my lips in a deep kiss that tasted exactly like absolute, perfect victory. It was not the desperate, punishing kiss of a highly terrified corporate titan. It was the deeply tender, unwavering promise of a powerful woman who had finally found her true home. I ran my fingers gently through her dark, perfectly messy hair. The heavy, invisible leash of our complicated old professional dynamic was completely shattered. We were no longer strict boss and obedient assistant, nor demanding owner and private manager. We were simply two women hopelessly addicted to the beautiful, undeniable gravity between us. Vivienne pulled back just enough to look deeply into my wide, happy eyes. The intense, fierce possessive fire in her gaze was still there, burning brighter than ever before. You are absolutely, completely mine, Chloe. And you are entirely mine, I promised back without a single ounce of lingering hesitation. She smiled brightly, a look of ultimate, breathtaking triumph settling perfectly on her face. Good, she purred darkly, effortlessly lifting me up straight from the desk chair into her strong arms. Now, let us properly discuss your new lifetime signing bonus in the master bedroom. The bright morning sunlight continued to pour endlessly through the massive glass windows. It beautifully illuminated the completely chaotic, wonderful new world we had successfully built together. And I knew, with absolute, undeniable certainty, that I would never try to run away from her again.